Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to iHeartRadio So Bad It's Good. Today, we have two people that did something that is so good it's great. I watched this thing on a recommendation, and it's a two-part docuseries on Netflix. It's part of a sports docuseries called Untold, and I believe there's going to be 8 of these things, and they're all amazing. But this one, to me, was especially, there's just something so special about this. The story is something we all lived through. I even remember this in 2013, the story of Manti Te'o and a catfish situation. I kind of took it at face value in 2013 and got to actually see what was behind this story. And it is completely gripping. People say that, real life can't live up to the movies. And I think this documentary really does say that that is not true, that real life can be just as incredible and fantastical than these fiction stories that we see. And this is completely real. We have the co-directors with us today of Untold, The Girlfriend Who Didn't Exist. We have Ryan Duffy and Tony Vainuku. Welcome, you guys. You knocked this out of the park. Congratulations, first off.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
This came out just a week ago, and everybody I recommend this to, I was telling Tony, as devoured this thing in one night. First off, the decision to make it a 2-part series, was there a special meaning in that? Why not just do one part?
Honestly, the story was that good and that complex, and there's a natural breaking point too, right? We did not start off when we started production on this nearly 3 years ago. It was not a 2-parter. It was, Untold's an anthology collection. Every film's a standalone sports documentary. We started off with the intention of making a really solid hour of storytelling, and got a few months into our primary interviews and initial production, and kind of looked at each other and realized, okay, we've got a little more in our hands here than we bargained for.
Do you guys essentially agree as co-directors, or do you, as part of the fun in co-directing, kind of disagreeing with each other and fighting over these ideas and how to present an actual story?
No, there wasn't any disagreeing. I think after doing the interview with Manti and spending a few days with him, I think we both knew like what we had and how golden, you see that last scene and you see how vulnerable he was and how open he was. I think me and Duffy are just looking at each other like, oh my gosh, we have a really, really good story here. I think we both knew that it was probably going to be more than an hour, and had a good idea just as storytellers, and running into a subject that is so vulnerable and ready to tell their story. So no, I felt like the process was really natural and easy for both of us when it came to that.
And what a perfect way to wait all of this time. You would not have had the powerful, the punch that this gives you, I think, is almost in the time since 2013. If you had made this in 2015, none of these people, Manti or Naya, would not have the perspective they have on their lives, or just seeing Manti still trying to struggle with this and forgiveness. And these are hugely powerful themes. Like you said, you were blown away. I was talking to Tony before you got on, Ryan, and we were talking about Naya. What was it like trying to gain the trust of Naya? Because she is such a key component of this. If we didn't have her in that, and especially that first shot of her walking in is just so powerful, knowing that we're going to get her perspective as well. What was that like to try to earn her trust?
It was critical to making this film, and it was a slow process. Tony said in an interview we were doing about this last week that so much of directing, so much of filmmaking happens before you ever pick up a camera, and it's true generally speaking, and really, really, really true in this one, because it did require a lot of trust on behalf of the two kind of primary subjects, who were kids. They were kids when they went through this, and they got burned and they got put through the ringer in terms of media coverage at the time. So, when Tony and I are reaching out, we are, for all intents and purposes, we're just more assholes with cameras trying to be predatory about their story,
Yeah.
So to really differentiate ourselves, and say, no, that's not what we're here to do. This isn't salacious. This isn't sensational. This is for the first time. Let's go back. Let's revisit this with that benefit of the decade of distance that you mentioned, Ryan, and really tell this through the eyes of the people who experienced it. It was critical. Look, I'm a huge fan of the show that Neve has on MTV, the Catfish show.
Yeah. I mean, that's even mentioned. Naya even mentions like, yeah, I've used some of those techniques or those because, by the way, you guys, and I'll have told this already in the beginning, just the lengths that Naya had to go through to keep this lie up. I mean, this person was like a method actor at times. I mean, even Dr. Phil, you guys, pops in on this. And that's why I was like, whoa, Dr. Phil sat down. And I had forgot all about that. Naya gave one of her first interviews to this where he makes her go into a back room to try to do the voice because nobody believed it was actually Naya doing this.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff, in the doc, I don't think has aged particularly well in terms of the way we treated this. But look, that's me with the benefit of my 2022 goggles looking back on 2012, 2013, right? And it's difficult to do that. I get it. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to make this film is, as you said, Ryan, we all thought we knew the story, right? We remembered this. It was one of the first high profile incidents of catfishing. But it seemed right for re-examination. One, because we hadn't heard from the two people who mattered, Naya and Manti, in quite some time since those initial interviews they gave. And two, because I think so much has changed culturally and from a society standpoint in terms of, if something like this happened today, I think there'd just be a different language around it and a different understanding of.
Well, I would hope so, but that's why it's so crucial that you guys even have the Deadspin reporters on there to kind of tell that story about they're trying to point out the inaccuracies in media and not really even taking into account that these are two people at the time. They're just saying, hey, media accounts are not even fact checking these things. And it really is a great, unique other perspective of this to kind of almost break it up. But it is interesting because they even realize they're dealing with real people by the end of this story. When you guys do you guys remember in 2012 or 2013, when you first heard about this story, what you guys thought of it on its face?
Yeah, sure do. I mean, for me personally, I didn't dig into it a ton. And because it was so personal on a Polynesian level, and there's not being very many of us out there, and then this kind of being a huge story, I didn't know the details, didn't really dig into it, wasn't really part of the wave that was making a ton of fun of him. So it was like it was great to, be able to come back around and tell this story in the right way.
And are you, I mean, you guys have to be happy with how this story, I mean, is there a cut on the cutting room floor that we're not seeing, like a third part of this thing? I mean, was it a challenge to get it down to 2 hours?
I mean, it was definitely if there was a challenge, it was getting it down, not extending it.
Yeah.
Right.
I had that, I won't lie, as a filmmaker, you set out to make something that's roughly an hour, a Netflix hour. So 55, 65, you have some flexibility, but you think you're making something for an hour, you build out your beat sheet, you do months worth of research and pre-pro and all this. And then you get the word that, okay, everyone agrees with you. You can do 2 parts. And you do have that moment where you're like, oh, what did I just sign up for? Oh my God, I'm making essentially 2 feature-length films. But after that initial pang, as soon as Tony and I got into it and we sat in the edit, we have an unbelievable editor named Nate Rose who worked on this with us. It was clear that no, that wouldn't actually be a problem. The problem would be fitting it all in there. And being able to go back and tell the journalism side of it really helps with that second part too, because you revisit some of the same beats, but you're doing it through this side door, right, of this simultaneous investigation as Manti and Naya kind of feel the walls closing in a little bit. You can build that suspense.
Well, I mean, you say so much about like we potentially know better now in 2022, but then I kept thinking over the weekend, I'm like, do we know better? Like, would it be even more intense for these guys, or would the story have just like been over and done with? And now a scandal will break over a weekend, and then if you can wait 3 days, you're on to the next scandal. Where this, I remember, like I wasn't even really into sports, and this even got to me. I remember it from the Twitter angle. I remember it from all the, you even show the SNL clips, you show the, everybody putting their arm around air going Manti with his girlfriend. And I remember laughing at those things, not really ever taking into account this was a person, never, I mean, and we're so used to that, but then actually hearing it from Manti himself and from his family and how hard this man worked at such a young age. you guys even get a powerful story of he didn't even want to go to Notre Dame, you guys. The
Right.
hand of God, like he got a sign from one of his, I think, a high school guidance counselor or something, and got this sign, and he changed. He wanted to go to California, and he winds up in Notre Dame because he believes it's ordained. This man really truly led from the gut, and then to see, so proud to be a hero to everybody, and then he almost gets caught up in that, or he almost tries to blame that. But it is wild that, the whole story hinges on his grandmother and Lene Kukua, his supposed girlfriend that he was madly in love with, died on the same day.
Wow.
And you get the details. Like, how hard was it to get his recounting of staying on the phone with Lene while she had gotten into the car accident leading into the cancer? I mean, he sat on the phone with her and listened to her breathing every day.
Right. Again, there's so much done off camera where you're discussing some of the details with him and discussing the story and just kind of finding out where he is with all of it. When we got him going, as far as like questions and whatnot, he recalls things in a detailed way. I mean, he was perfect. That's why I say, me and Duffy are looking at each other like, wow. I mean, it's every detail, him breathing into his hands. I mean, that's just him, that really is just him being ready to share and remembering this all like it was yesterday. And in a very healing and healthy way, right? So he's not reliving his trauma, but he is retelling it, the best way he could. So there's a little bit of luck with that.
Ryan, was it comforting? I was talking to Tony before you got on, is that, I was looking at Manti's social media, and he was, saying, so thankful for the reception this has gotten, and so many people reaching out to him and so much positivity. I mean, I even went on his Instagram and go, yeah, you're still a hero, man. Like, I wanted to reach out personally and tell this man that I looked up to him. And, it's just so funny that even when, like, heroes never truly die, like there's something so inspirational about him still. Were you worried though about Naya? Have you talked to Naya since this has been released? Because I'm assuming there's a lot of criticism going on, with her actions through this decade. She even talks about not being able to be hired for a time. Have you been able to speak with her, and is she regretful at all for participating?
Yeah, I'm in touch with Naya regularly, and I'm so sorry about that. I don't know if that ring came through.
No.
Yeah, we're in touch with Naya regularly, and look, I think Manti is getting that hero's welcome. I really wish Naya was not getting kind of the villain treatment that she is in certain corners of the internet. I also think she's gotten a lot of support.
I'm so happy she's able to live her true life. I mean, and you highlight that, with her dancing, and she found a community of like-minded people. And I thought that was really, I just think some of the details can be so harsh when you hear it in a 2-hour format instead of living it.
Yeah, look, that was the thing. Tony and I did not set out. We don't see this story, and I don't think the film tells the story of black and white and good and bad. I really don't. And I think if there is a bad guy in this story, the bad guy is all of us, right? It's the media. It's the way we all reacted to this. It's the way we all celebrated this invasion of privacy into the private lives of teenagers and their private communication, right? And we were all complicit in that. And me too, by the way. Like, I was following this story in the media just like everyone else. So to the extent that Naya is catching any kind of grief all over again, I think it is a huge credit to her. And similar to Manti, a huge statement about where she is at in her life right now, that she could be as vulnerable and honest and accountable as she was in the film. And I think for both of them, as Tony said, it's because they are in places now 10 years after the fact. And I think we are in that sweet spot where people can be both still raw and vulnerable, but also have enough distance. I think that decade span is really the right place to revisit these things. I think she's just feeling, confident enough in who she is, and she's gone on a journey to get there. But I think she's really on solid footing right now.
Was there ever a instant where you toyed with the idea, or was it too sensational to actually have these two people meet in real life? Was that ever even in your head at all?
It's been discussed. I mean, but I think we had come to realize that it wasn't necessary. Duffy and I we just, to bring them back together it just didn't serve the story, at this time in their lives. And again, with Manti being willing to tell it, but not relive it, like we didn't want to, put them back together since they hadn't spoken since the beginning. It was totally up to them. But, I think we came together as filmmakers and thought that it probably wasn't necessary for the story we're trying to tell.
Yeah, that really would have been more of a Nev Catfish kind of a MTV,
Right.
sensationalism. And I loved how you guys landed it really beautifully. Tony, as a, how important is it for your culture and what you do? You represent people just like Manti. Do you take that into your work every day? Because you see that with Manti of just wanting to be that good example. So it was even kind of another fall from grace on top of his own personal humiliation when he didn't meet his father's standards. Do you feel that same way with directing and inspiring people?
Yeah, the culture is small. The Tonga and Samoan culture is a pretty small a small community, a big community, but a small community. It's funny because the little representation that we have in the industry is The Rock and Taika Waititi. So like the little bit that we have, we're small and mighty at the same time. So going into Sundance as like the second, Tongan director alongside with Taika Waititi, it became real apparent that I was a celebrity within my own culture. So I quickly had to, I always remember that and understand that. And the stories that I tell, are very close to me for that reason. And then, like we're very trusting, as you see in the movie, where, Manti is like, I'm not doing the film without Tony, basically. And so that really is helpful. And so there's an I think I feel I owe it to, people that I'm telling stories with and my community in a lot of ways.
Have you heard back all positive from your community that have watched this and from family and stuff?
Yeah. Everybody is super, super proud. I mean, just that wave has been huge. There was one comment that said, you guys had made a dent in the universe. And I'm just like,
listen, I hate to blow you guys up,
but you saved Hawaii, you saved Hawaii. And it's like the people of Hawaii. I mean, the feedback's amazing. You're just like, wow. It's
truly one of the things that I love when I can recommend something that I know no one will push back against, where I can be like, no, just trust me. You're going to love this. It's going to be great. Speaking of like sports psychology, I have a trainer. I'm trying to get in shape and it's just horrible. It's just horrific. I hate it. But this guy is a college football player. And I told him about this story on Netflix and he was like, yeah, I heard about that. And he's actually he studied sports psychology after he got injured in college football. But he was even talking about the Manti story and how that was. And he just said college football and the fans of college football, it's so intense, and people look at you a certain way. And most people, the sports psychology element of it is poo-pooed. It's like, no, you don't need that. No, you're tough. You're tough out there and you be tough, and it is interesting to that point in the second part of the story when Manti says, hey man, I need something. I'm not well. And he actually does go in and work with this person and he's better for it. Is it interesting in sports, the stigma that mental health still has with all players because we have this tough guy kind of attitude about it?
I think so. And I feel like, that's what the whole Untold series does for sports figures, right? Is gets behind the athlete that is only known for basically wins and losses, right? And then we just kind of add that human element to it. Well, it's all of the human experience behind these sports figures. I think that's the genius of the Way brothers and Duffy and the whole Untold series with all these sports figures, in my opinion.
Yeah, Ryan, how do you put this together? Because you actually, through this, made me go and watch other Untold. I was like, okay, like this is a whole thing. Like we got Caitlyn Jenner, we got this hockey team, we got this. And I was like, whoa, these are all told in this kind of like intensely good way, like move over 30 for 30. We got like, what was the intent when you pitched this? Was it just, I want to tell, did you know all of the stories you already wanted to pitch, or is it constantly evolving? Is there going to be another round of these documentaries? I sure hope so.
Well, thank you. First off, that's very kind of you. And that's the hope, right? Is that people come in for, oh, I remember Manti, or I'm a football fan, or I'm a tennis fan. I love Marty Fish. And the filmmaking quality is such that you will stick around, maybe even for a story that you didn't necessarily know. That is the hope, certainly with Untold and with anthologies overall. So yeah, to answer your question directly, we don't know every story. We're constantly researching and developing, doing so as we speak for hopefully the next batch of these. We've got a few more rolling out, including one tomorrow on the Great Street Basketball Collective and one. And then a couple of others coming later this season. But I think the real thing that we try to hang our hat on is, I made mention of this earlier in terms of Manti and Naya. It's really firsthand accounts, right? I think the sports industry is not short on kind of the chattering classes, right? You can find your debate shows and your analysts and your journalists, and everyone has an opinion. Of course, we all love to have opinions. That's what sports is. I've got a bunch of them, and nobody cares, I assure you. But I'm very interested in Manti's opinion, and I'm very interested in Naya's. I'm very interested to hear things that affected the people in the trenches from kind of the inside out. And I'm interested in building filmmaking universes around that don't just kind of license a bunch of expensive footage from the official league source and then string some interviews across it and, build a documentary that way. You can certainly do that. But I think, we also take a lot of care to, and I hope it comes through in the film, find footage you haven't seen before. Go back, find those, Pee Wee football clips of Manti.
Well, you had those great, those high school clips. You had I love the footage of the draft when his family was all in the house and he didn't go in the first round. Like, that was really great. I mean, I loved all the other characters you had, his best friend, his parents. You brought all of these people. So you really did create and fill out that universe. So you felt like you were a part of his family, and you kind of, you felt this very similar way towards Naya, and you really felt the walls closing in at times. And I thought it was just the pacing of it was just so beautiful. What is the thing that you guys learned from working on this one in particular? I mean, do you go into projects wanting to learn things, or do you feel like, does anything change in your perspective as you work on this?
I'll tell you what, for me personally, going into any film like this and with documentary filmmaking in itself, it's just important to go in very open and flexible. I think when you go in with conclusions, or you go in as prepared as you can be, of course, but you got to be flexible. You have to stay open to what they have to share and be able to move in that direction, especially in the interviewing. If you're locked in on the structure you're trying to do or the answers you think are there, you may miss some of that, and you may not allow them to tell these wonderful truths from that first person recollection of it. You might miss it. So I think that's what's important as directors to do when you're going into these stories. Yeah.
And what about you, Ryan?
Yeah, that's really well said. Keeping an open mind and following the story where it goes, I think is paramount to all these things. And the other thing I'll say, it actually relates back to another question you asked, Ryan, which is about, did you think about putting them in the same room? As Tony said, we did a little bit, and it's, he's too humble and kind to say this, but it was him. It was Tony who said, like, hey, man, I don't think we need that. And I was kind of a little more on the side of, wouldn't it be interesting? And where we eventually landed, which is my answer to your question about what I learned, is get out of the damn way. Like, just get your filmmaking hands off screen. And I think to the extent we are putting people in a room together in this kind of, we rented this hotel room, here are these people, like, we made that. Everyone at home knows that we did that. And I think this film is stronger because we did not, and we just let it play out and we stepped back. So it was a good reminder that the best filmmaking is very subtle filmmaking.
And I thought, just even in Manti's, of like the lines about forgiveness at the end and through, have you forgiven yourself? Have you forgiven? To me, that was worth way more than seeing those two in a room together. And it's really just was like, just I know I got a couple more minutes with you. This just came up to my mind. Was there ever any opportunities to speak with Naya's family at all, or did they not want to participate in the project?
Yeah, we actually did. We interviewed Naya's younger sister, who was wonderful and super gracious with her time. It just didn't end up, a lot of things over the course of filmmaking don't make the cut for a variety of reasons. She was great, but we didn't end up using her. And then Naya, to her credit, lost her father, like literally the week of that first interview, which is another one of those things that people and again, a lot of people are being wonderful and supportive, but for people who are being a little cruel, like you just don't know. You never know, right? What's going on with people. And Naya did that first interview with us, to her unbelievable credit, while grieving and going through a personal loss. So anyway,
I really appreciated her participation, because I really don't think this would be nearly as powerful without her at all. It would have just, this really shows how many unique perspectives there are in this world and how just wild things can get. And, and the other thing is, Manti even talks, people then started to think Manti was in on this. But if you watch this guy, if you listen to this guy, you can completely see how this could have happened. Like there is no, he is so trusting. He is raised with such a religious background. Right. And Lene was telling him everything he wanted to hear in terms of religion and saying, get in there and fight and all of this stuff, being very inspirational. I could there was not a doubt in my mind that I could see. I was like, I would have done, if I hadn't even, I could see me getting fooled by this stuff. Right. And it is interesting that there was a very positive relationship between them, even though it was based on completely false pretenses, which I found interesting, that Manti still was getting something out of it at times in his college football career.
Right. And I think what it keeps coming back to is everybody says, they can't imagine, they can't, the 3 years seems like a lot of time, but what we hope to show, and Manti will say it over and over, is that it was like a year and a half of just kind of not this full on relationship until she goes into the coma. And so he's always saying it's about a year and a half ish is what he'll say when we're together. So, but everybody just keeps throwing down the 3 years, and can't imagine it. But yeah.
You guys, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm telling you, I've been talking about this for the last week. You guys will not regret it. But then just add it to the My List category on Netflix, and all those documentaries you're going to pick up. One of the smarter things you guys did is at the end, you showed previews for the Untold series. And that's how I was like, oh, there's more of these. And it got all added to my list, and I can now work my way through those. And listen, I'm not even the world's biggest sports fans, but I got to tell you, I love sports documentaries, and you guys knocked it out of the flipping park. I am so excited about this thing. And like I said, I went to Instagram immediately and looked at what Manti was doing and Naya, and I was so impressed to see his beautiful child. And I was just very happy. This thing has a real positive ending, but also kind of shows you where we were and where we've been and where we're going to, and really how to always keep an open mind. But Tony and Ryan, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Where else can we support you? The Untold series. I know, Tony, you got I looked at In Football We Trust and all that. What's coming up next for you directing wise?
Yeah, I have a 5-part series that I'm directing with Netflix and Jared Hess, who had done
Napoleon Dynamite. Yes.
And Natural Yeah. So we have a project that's a little different than this one, but it's next year, which I can't talk too heavily on it, that I've been working on.
And Ryan, you please keep just doing the Untold series and whatever. I trust you completely as filmmakers. So I just really think this was great, and I can't wait to tell as many people about it as possible. So thank you so much for joining us today, guys.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We really appreciate it.